That last scene in Tumbleton, a kneeling captive, a boy gripping a sword, and 4 quiet words closing the hour. And now we begin. Daeron's first kill is the part you already understand. What is easy to miss is that the other 4 rooms of this hour, a ruin, a refugee camp, a throne room, and a mountain cave, were all building the same argument. James Norton joined Ryan Condal's Fire and Blood adaptation this season to play Ormund, and episode 4 is where you understand exactly why. The scene shows you precisely what Ormund is doing to that boy. It just never says it out loud. And there is a defensible answer sitting in plain sight that is colder than the obvious read. So the question is the one you asked the second that sword came down. Did Ormund just turn Daeron into a tyrant? The sword Daeron Targaryen swings in this episode's final minute gets loaded over the whole hour, and the loading starts at Harrenhal. Criston Cole and Gwaine Hydar ride up, expecting Aemond and Vhagar, and get Alice Rivers instead, delivering the castle's status report, the castellan slain, his successor slain, and the man after that slain as well. This is the same Woods witch who told Daemon last season that he would die in that castle, and she has now outlasted every man who tried to hold it. Then she lands the real blow. Aemond seized Harrenhal after Daemon abandoned it, and the moment he learned Rhaenyra had taken King's Landing, he and his dragon fled. That is how the Hand of the King learns the capital has fallen, from a stranger in a ruin, with her quiet, "oh, you didn't know," twisting the knife. Gwaine does the arithmetic out loud. King's Landing fallen, Aegon dead, both queens in chains, and the 2 of them stranded with a meager army and no dragon. He declares the game played and lost, and Criston's reply is the episode's first thesis, because for him, it was never a game. He was a foot soldier, a steward's son whose family melted away the day a lord's favor failed, and he spits that nobles can afford to lose because they go home to a featherbed either way. There is no home for a man like him while Rhaenyra sits the throne, so he proposes to stop fighting like a knight and start stinging the way the scorpion stings the ox. Wraiths, he calls it. Fear as their standard, strikes from the quiet and the darkness, a fight that will not be clean but will be pure, man against man and free of dragons. The room accepts it with a vow borrowed from Gwaine: cling to honor lest they become beasts, which is exactly the kind of promise this war exists to break. By the time Gwaine's raven reaches the Hightower host, the word it carries is that Aemond and Vhagar will not be joining them after all. And with that, the Green Cause stops being an alliance and becomes 3 grudges wearing the same colors. Aegon's half of the hour plays as humiliation comedy, and the thing to catch is the accounting underneath it. This is the episode pricing exactly what a king is worth once the dragon is gone. It opens on Sunfire dying in the woods and on locals who have already priced the miracle. A penny to touch the dragon, a half-groat to sit the saddle. The deposed king kneels at his own dragon's head whispering, "Wake up, Sunfire, I'm here," while a tout counts his grief in coin. That's 2 touches. When Criston Cole paraded Meleys' severed head through King's Landing last season, the small folks saw a dead god and despaired, and now a dead god is a market stall, which is how much divinity the dragons have left. Larys refuses to let the grief become a burial for 2. He tells Aegon plainly that Sunfire is dead, then asks the only question that matters: will you stay and rot with him, or will you get up and live? So they walk into a camp of the war's dispossessed with a cover story that is barely a lie. They are refugees from Sharp Point, which Aemond burned to the ground. The camp leader, Janos, takes their coin, keeps Larys because a man who reads and knows herbs might be useful, and sends the anointed king of Westeros to the latrines. Tangletongue and Mangleface, Janos announces to general laughter. And just like that, Aegon has a work detail, a partner, and a nickname, none of them negotiable. Aegon's protest that he can read just as well as Larys is the funniest and saddest sentence he has ever spoken, because it is the first time in his life he has had to apply for anything. Then the camp hands Aegon the crueler lesson: the world believes King Aegon is dead, slain by his own brother, and the man wearing his ruined face has to swallow it. It curdles fast. Aegon mouths off in the food line, the outrage of a king served last, and the camp leader Janos answers the tantrum with a knife point pressed against the throat that once commanded the Iron Throne. The standoff leaves Aegon on his knees in the mud, with his hand at the man's boot, which is as honest a portrait of his reign as the show has ever composed. Aemon took his body, Rhaenyra took his city, and a man named Janos took his dignity for the price of a tent, and Larys is the only one still betting the ladder goes back up. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra asks the question the episode is built on: why seize Tumbleton at all? It is no stronghold, just a market town with meek lords and poor walls. Her own answer is the sharpest read anyone gives. This week, Ormund is daring her to rain fire on a seat that raised her banner, so the realm can name her Maegor Returned and rise against her. So she refuses the bait, and when Orwyle proposes sending Daemon's river host against the town instead, not bloodless, but far more merciful than dragons, she calls it a good scheme and sends the orders to Lord Tully. A dragon will keep vigil overhead in the meantime, which is how Ulf the White gets assigned to Tumbleton, and how Hugh ends up begging to share the watch. I will not tire of watching when one I love is below, because his wife is in that town. If the word Tumbleton is already making the book readers nervous, that is all I will say about it. The rest of her government is held together with string. Corlys rides out to hunt Triarchy raiders, instead of sitting at council, I'm her hand, not her mouth, and sends his son Aelin in his place, a sailor who admits he is not a creature of the court. Her fix for the empty treasury is blame management, name a master of coin so the people have someone to fault when they discover how little is left, and Ser Torren Manderly has intrigued her enough to audition for the job. The streets have already returned their verdict, Queen of Bastards scrawled on the walls, while Ulf drinks his way through the taverns as a celebrity and tries to leverage his new station for favors the crown will not grant. Mysaria warns that the sedition is spreading, and Rhaenyra's response is the episode's quiet rhyme. She summons Luther Largent and sends the gold cloaks into the streets. A queen who spent the morning refusing to burn a town that insulted her crown spends the evening cracking down on citizens who insulted it in paint, and the show wants you to clock the distance between those two mercies. Our most valuable intelligence comes from Alicent, who sketches Ormund Hightower from memory, a self-styled scholar who studies the histories, collects tapestries, writes ballads, and despises the ignorant and the uncouth. Gwaine thought him cruel when they were young, Alicent adds, and with Daeron he is said to be fatherly, two descriptions this episode is about to force into the same sentence. Then comes the confession underneath. Alicent sent Daeron away on purpose. She bore Viserys 3 Targaryens and wanted her last son to be a Hightower, and she names it her truest act of motherhood, while admitting she no longer knows what fate the choice consigned him to. Rhaenyra's answer, "You know I would have spared him," is gentle and worthless in the same breath, because sparing Daeron stopped being in anyone's gift the day she took the city. Daemon's chapter looks like the episode's best dark comedy, and it hides the hour's quietest deception, so watch what he brings home and what he leaves out. The errand itself is farce. He asks Jane Eyre for resources, she has no soldiers to spare, and he flies off with 10,000 golden dragons that are, functionally, a bribe to make him leave faster. On the way home, he finds something he was not hunting. His daughter Rhaena dirt-streaked in a mountain cave, with a wild dragon sheepstealer answering to her. He holds her like a father for once, and she still refuses to come back, choosing exile with her dragon over facing what the queen will make of a beast tied to the battle that killed Jacaerys and Daemon of all people, lets her go. Then he walks into the council chamber and lays his trophies on the table, the veil's gold, and the severed head of the man who killed Rhaenyra's son. One is vengeance and one is solvency, and the council instantly starts brawling over the second. Swords for the war, or bread for the starving city, because 10,000 dragons cannot be both. Watch Rhaenyra in that room. She sits with her son's killer's head in front of her and is not permitted a single feeling about it, because grief is a luxury the ledger does not cover. When Rhaenyra clears the room and asks what matters, who was he? Was he allied to Aemond or to Ormond? What became of Sheepstealer? Daemon answers like a man closing doors. A dragon is not a precise instrument, and Sheepstealer fled, riderless. We are not like to see it again. Only he knows the wild dragon now answers to his own daughter, so the severed head buys Rhaena her exile. and someone in the Red Keep still walks away asking the question nobody else thought to. Whose head is that? What Rhaenyra tells him in private is the scene's real wound. She wanted the killer alive. She wanted to look on the one who killed her son. And Daemon's defense is the whole marriage in 4 words. I have served your interest. Then the episode hands its strangest, softest scene to the 2 queens. Rhaenyra brings Alicent her father's remains and Viserys' ring, the same Otto Hightower she sent to the block when the city fell, returned now as a gesture neither woman has a word for. Alicent reaches out and straightens the collar of Rhaenyra's cloak, an old instinct from a friendship the war ate, and neither of them names it. It is mourning between the last 2 people who remember why any of this started. Every scene Ormund Hightower gets in this episode is a lesson, and Daeron is always in the front row. In Tumbleton, he sleeps in the Footleys' own bedchamber and receives their petition like an inconvenience, reminds them that the wage of treason is death, and asks whether Rhaenyra is a queen at all or just a bitch with a dragon. Then he turns to Daeron and distills the whole performance into a rule: when dealing with those beneath you, be fair but firm. When one of his own soldiers, Garrick, assaults a weaving family in the occupied town, the answer is not rage but procedure, a public sentence of gelding and a broken arm, staged in a courtyard with the victims watching and Daeron standing witness. That is the Hightower brand in miniature, never savage, always correct, terror with paperwork. And then the finale, a candlelit hall, a 7-pointed star of sand on the stone floor, Tessarion coiled in the shadows, and a bloodied man on his knees. Ormund preaches his creed of Hightower refinement against Targaryen savagery, cups the boy's face in both hands like a father at a blessing, and has the condemned man brought before the prince to be executed in the name of justice. Daeron hesitates, argues, hardens, and the show holds on the exact instant the softness leaves his face before the sword comes down. The man dies on the stones. Daeron stands over the body looking sick, and 4 words close the hour like a verdict. And now we begin. Before the screen cuts to black and Tessarion's snarl rips through the dark over the wet sounds of feeding. So did Ormund just turn Daeron into a tyrant? The episode leaves 3 readings on the table, and they are not equally strong. The tyranny as choice reading is the weakest, because what is actually on screen is not a boy choosing cruelty. Every element of that room, the victim, the sword, the timing, the dragon as audience, was arranged by Ormund, and Daeron's face after the kill is grief, not appetite. The conditioning reading has the screen's full support. This is a test of obedience. The final stage of the grooming Alicent unknowingly described when she called Ormund fatherly, and now we begin, is a man announcing that his weapon is ready for use. The reading that Daeron is trying to bury his mother's soft, prayerful boy and prove he can be what Oldtown demands is implied rather than shown. It lives in that flash of anger before the swing, and it survives only as the lever the conditioning pulls, a boy performing manhood for the only father he has ever known. The coldest reading, that this is Hightower politics, rebranding terror as procedure, is informed speculation about the grand design. Nothing on screen spells the doctrine out, but every scene of the occupation runs on it. The fair but firm lecture, the courtroom gelding, the execution dressed as law. Put them together and the verdict writes itself. Ormund has not made Daeron a tyrant, tyrants choose, and Daeron was never offered a choice. Alicent wanted to save her son from the beasts of the Red Keep, and instead she delivered him to a gentler voice that forged him into a blade that will never question who it cuts. He has made him something more useful and far more dangerous, an instrument that believes the hand swinging it is justice, and while Rhaenyra spends the whole episode refusing to become Maegor Returned, a scholar with tapestries and ballads quietly builds the exact thing she is afraid of being. So that's my read, but the sword is barely clean and the question refuses to stay closed. Everything that damns Ormund also excuses Daeron, a terrified kid obeying the only father figure in the room, right up until you remember whose hand was on the blade. So you make the call the episode wouldn't. Is Daeron a victim or a villain? Drop your verdict in the comments and defend it, because I will be reading. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss our weekly deep dive into the latest secrets of Westeros. Comment below. Did Aegon's kingship die with Sunfire? Or is Larys right that anonymity is the making of his legend?